Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Trumbore with your nightly review for Wednesday, March 20. It's 4:01 p.m. Eastern Time. Dow Jones finished up 57 to 14,512. Remember, the new all-time high is 14,539. S&P was up 10, 0.7% to 1558. So still 7 points shy of its all-time high. NASDAQ was up 25 points, 0.8% to 3254. Gold closed at $16.05. Oil $93. And the 10-year Treasury with a yield of 1.96. And today being Wednesday, the bull-bear reading, investors' intelligence or lack thereof. Bulls 47.4, and the bears are down to 18.6, and remember that's a contrarian indicator. Overseas, Tokyo up 2%, China up 2.6, that was the Shanghai composite. London down 0.2, Paris up 1.4%, and Frankfurt DAX up 0.7. London was down because the government cut its 2013 growth forecast to 0.6% from 1.2%. That's incredibly anemic, obviously. Britain has recovered only half of the output lost in the 2008-09 recession, while here in the U.S., it is back above pre-recession levels. So the David Cameron government is in trouble as his economic plan has fallen far short of expectations. We had dueling press conferences at 3 o'clock just about an hour ago with Ben Bernanke in Washington, and in Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu and President Obama. But I'll talk about Obama more tomorrow. First off, that's my Final Four. I know it's crazy. That's a 7. That's a 7, but I told you the other day I'm all in with San Diego State since the first day of the season, so I can't change now. I have the Aztecs beating Gonzaga in the final. And that's the Federal Reserve, hopefully you can see that. But first, FedEx shares fell sharply, down $7.50 to $99 from its high of $109. The company said the third quarter was very challenging due to continued weakness in international air freight markets, pressure on yields due to industry overcapacity, and customers selecting less expensive and slower transit services. Company added, our lower than expected results for the quarter and reduced full-year earnings outlook were driven by third quarter international revenues declining approximately $100 million versus our guidance, primarily due to accelerating customer preference for lower yielding international services, and we expect these international revenue trends to continue. And then you had shares in Caterpillar, which exactly 1 year ago were $111, 111. They closed down $1.50 today to $86.75, so as the market's been going up, CAT has been going down a bit. Today it said its global retail machine sales fell 13% during a 3-month period ended in February. Asia Pacific sales for the period declined 26% from the prior year. That compares to a 12% decline during the 3 months ended in January and a 7% dip during the 3 months ended in December. So that's not a good trend. North American sales dropped 12% during the February period. Sales in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East declined 9%. sales were up in Latin America, up 3%. So FedEx and Caterpillar are two very good bellwethers, and it'll be interesting to see what that kind of news augurs for the first quarter earnings reports, which will start coming in earnest around April 10th. Okay, the Federal Reserve completed its two-day meeting. Around 2 o'clock, they said they will keep up their bond buying at a pace of $85 billion a month. The Open Market Committee's statement read in part, labor market conditions have shown signs of improvement in recent months, but the unemployment rate remains elevated. Recent data suggest a return to moderate economic growth following a pause late last year. The FOMC said it continues to see downside risks to the economic outlook. It also said that the housing sector has strengthened further, but fiscal policy has become somewhat more restrictive. Kansas City Fed President Esther George was the lone dissenter for the second meeting in a row, saying she was concerned that the continued high level of monetary accommodation increased the risk of future economic and financial imbalances and over time could cause an increase in long-term inflation expectations. Now, the Fed policymakers lowered their expectations for the unemployment rate at the end of the year to a range of 7.3 to 7.5% by the end of the year. By the end of 2014, 6.7 to 7, and in 2015, 6 to 6.5. And then they actually notched down, ratcheted down their GDP forecast very, very slightly. 2.3 to 2.8, 2.9 to 3.4 next year, and 2.9 to 3.7. You might recall the Congressional Budget Office is projecting 3.4 annualized pace by the end of 2014, and then 3.6 in 2015 for the next about 4 years after. Now, the Fed estimates that the first increase in the funds rate from the current 0 to 0.25% will occur in 2015. Now, recall their unemployment target is 6.5%. So there you go. Of course, the Fed's forecasts are absolutely miserable. Now, the markets, both overseas and here, almost totally ignored what was really awful news out of Cyprus. The Interior Minister warned that international lenders would not accept a Plan B. I won't get into specifics. It's because it's not going to be accepted. It does involve pension funds and an emergency domestic bond issue, but it's not going to fly. Talks between Cyprus President Anastasiadis and Russian President Vladimir Putin were fruitful and constructive. But Michael Saras, Cyprus finance minister, he's in Moscow right now, said that there was no breakthrough with his Russian counterpart. Cyprus has asked Russia for a 5-year extension of an existing €2.5 billion loan that matures in 2016, as well as a reduction in the 4.5% rate of interest. When asked about the loan extension, Saras said talks were ongoing about things beyond that. Jorg Asmussen, a European Central Bank executive member, said on Wednesday that banks in Cyprus were insolvent without being quickly recapitalized, and the ECB could only provide liquidity to solvent banks. Asmussen told a German weekly, "We did not threaten to cut off liquidity, but just pointed out as a matter of fact that we can provide emergency liquidity only to solvent banks, and that the solvency of Cypriot banks cannot be assumed if an aid program is not agreed on soon, which would allow for a quick recapitalization of the banking sector. The Troika, the European Union, European Central Bank, and the IMF is not accepting Cyprus Plan B. Members of the Troika mission to Cyprus were due to meet on Wednesday with political leaders. The banks are now closed until Tuesday. I didn't hear officially, but I'm assuming the stock market also remains closed until Tuesday. The two big Cypriot banks are living exclusively off emergency liquidity from the central bank. Germany says banks in Cyprus may never reopen if a bailout is not agreed to. Analysts say Russia may provide more funding in return for interest in Cyprus offshore energy fields. You know, you have the situation with Britain. They have 3,000 troops on Cyprus, plus their dependents, and it has tens of thousands of expats living on the island. Very nice weather there. One of the expats told the BBC the situation was dire and there was great anxiety about the possibility of a collapse of the banks, so forget a 3% or 6.75% or 9.9% levy. If the banks collapse, you could lose everything. Most of our money, this is the expat, most of our money is kept in deposits in a savings account, so I cannot make withdrawals. The cash machines are supposed to be restocked, but are often found empty. We've got enough money to last us until the end of the week. And now you have people worried, of course, about whether their salaries are going to be paid. You know, economists have been warning that skimming private accounts violates Eurozone deposit guarantees and could spook depositors in other countries with troubled banks. There's a fear European lenders may raise borrowing rates if they see Cyprus leaving the Eurozone and setting an example for Greece and others to follow. Yuri Dadush, director of the International Economics Program at the Carnegie Endowment, said, "I think this represents a dangerous precedent. I would not rule out the possibility that this would be repeated elsewhere." It's a very, very dangerous course. Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev blasted the EU's handling of the debt crisis, criticizing the EU for showing the same disregard for small savers the Soviet Union once did. Medvedev added that if an unprecedented confiscation of assets in Cyprus banks went ahead, Moscow might reconsider its double taxation treaty with the island nation. All possible mistakes that could have been made by them were made, said Medvedev. Economist John Lonsky with Moody's Investor Services, "It's a slippery slope," he said, warning that it could lead to runs on banks in other troubled countries like Spain and Italy. And through all of this, IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde's home was searched by French police today, looking into whether the former French finance minister Lagarde erred in agreeing to an arbitration to end a dispute with businessman Bernard Tapie, who was a big supporter of Nicolas Sarkozy. And this goes back to a sale of German sportswear brand Adidas. I will just say Obama did land in Israel today. I saw most of the press conference. Obama made a commitment to Israel from the standpoint, even as we are clear-eyed about the difficulties, we will never lose sight of the vision of an Israel at peace with its neighbors. Obama added, the United States stands with Israel because it is in our fundamental security interest to stand with Israel. Our alliance is eternal. It is forever. Again, far more to come. This morning we woke up to something very scary, and it didn't get a lot of publicity, but computer networks at 2 major South Korean banks and 3 top TV broadcasters went into shutdown mode en masse at 2 p.m. Wednesday afternoon Seoul time. These 3 top broadcasters just shut off right at 2 o'clock, along with a couple big banks. Skulls popped up on the computer screens. Clearly it was hacking from North Korea. Had to be. Some computers started to get back online more than 2.5 hours later. Shinhan Bank, I believe they're the first or second largest in South Korea, reported a system shutdown, including online banking and automated teller machines. It's all happened exactly at 2 o'clock. Experts say it takes up to 6 months to plan something like that. Customer data held by the attacked financial institutions was not compromised, so it seems. And it appears as of now operations are returning to normal. South Korea's new president, Park Geun-hye, used her first conversation with Chinese leader Xi Jinping to urge Beijing to help revive stalled talks with North Korea. In a 20-minute call on Wednesday, Ms. Park underscored her determination to respond firmly to provocations by Pyongyang. Yesterday I mentioned that I thought it had to be Al-Qaeda in Iraq that was responsible for the massive wave of bombings that killed 65, and today Al-Qaeda claimed responsibility in a statement saying, or warning the Shiite-led government to stop executing Sunni prisoners or expect more bad events and seas of blood. What has reached you on Tuesday was the first drop of rain in the first phase that will be followed by more revenge. Well, that's all for today. I'll be back with you tomorrow, Thursday. I do leave you with this. Did you hear about the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant being out of power for a day? If it had lasted 4 days, that could have resulted in a meltdown. It appears the outage was caused by a small rat. After some investigation, TEPCO found a burned spot on an electricity supply system inside the still crippled plant with a singed dead rat nearby. Take care.